Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll have roll call, please.
Councilmember Walters?
Yes.
Halsey?
Yes.
Culbertson? Yes. Miller?
Yes.
Mayor Peters?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to add to the agenda the 3 items that are in front of you. We'll do an item F for application for exempt permit from Ducks Unlimited.
Under the consent agenda?
On the consent agenda? Yeah, I'm sorry. Item F. And then item G under consent agenda, payment, application for payment number 18 for water treatment facility. And under ordinances and resolutions in item C for resolution supporting state legislation.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Carried. Citizen comments. Our first item is a resolution appointing Reggie Welly as City of Morris Police Chief.
So I'll just, following the Civil Service Commission process of reviewing applications, actually the second time around, and interviewing candidates and discussing the ranking of the candidates, it's my privilege to recommend to the City Council that Reggie Welly be appointed as our next police chief for the City of Morris.
I'd like to say that I've said kind of in the past that I would like to see the city council have a chance to ask questions of our candidates. And we haven't had that chance yet. So I think it's important that I have questions for them, and maybe other members here do have questions. We do have to ratify this. And so I'd like to make a motion to postpone the resolution appointing Reggie Welly as the City of Morris Police Chief until the city council has had an opportunity to question the candidate.
The one candidate?
Yep.
So that's not the process that's in place. The process that's in place is the Civil Service Commission is selected by the council and tasked by the council to select the candidates by ranking for the appointing officer to make a selection, to make an appointment.
Oh, no, I understand that, and I understand the process, and I agree with it, and I'm not saying that the candidate isn't the correct candidate. I, as a council member that has to ratify this and say yes to it, I would like the chance to ask questions. That's what I'm saying. That's why I would like to postpone it until we have a chance as a council to question them. If any of the other council members has questions, maybe none of you do, and this motion doesn't get a second, but I'm voicing my opinion on how I would like to do that.
So what I would say to you is this. Then you should get rid of the Civil Service Commission and then turn it over to the city manager to hire. And then it wouldn't even come to the city council. Because I think really you have 2 choices. One is to either ratify it or reject it. That's the 2 choices you have in front of you right now. By city charter, by Civil Service Commission rules. So to change the rules and then turn around and implement your own process of vetting candidates for selection, I don't think it'd be appropriate, and certainly Aaron can weigh in on that, but
I don't believe that we're vetting the candidate for the selection. The selection has been given to us. But I don't believe that
Right.
I've ever had an opportunity to ask any questions. For me to give my answer of yes or no. I just find that for me, that's hard to accept the fact that I have to just say yes or notice something without knowing or asking any questions that I, as a council member, and, you know, I've been elected by people in the city that they want a voice, and I am their voice, and if they've got questions, maybe if they hear this, they get the opportunity to call me and say, hey, I would like to know this, or I would like to know that, and I would like to know some things. Now, whether or not anybody else on the council agrees with me, I mean, that's my opinion, I've made the motion, whether it gets seconded and goes on is up to the other 4 members of the voting council. I'm just voicing my opinion on it. No disrespect to the candidate, no disrespect to the process or your selection, Blaine. It's just the way that I feel about that, and I thought I would want me to know.
Well, I guess I was pretty vocal a couple of meetings ago. I kind of weighed in on my thoughts on the whole police commission, and I support the police commission, and I'm a proponent of it, advocate of it. I think it's important that the city public has representation, and I think we as a council need to trust their judgment. We've had good chiefs that have been hired through that process in the past. Ross Teagues, he was a good chief. Jim Beauregard, he was a good chief, and he was elected through that same process. So I understand what Brian's saying, but, you know, it may be nice to have an opportunity to get to know the candidate, but I think, for me personally, I have to trust the commission and their judgment. And in this particular case, I do. I think Reggie's gonna make a fine chief, so that's my opinion.
I'd have to agree with you, Kevin. We have the commission. They've went through it twice. They've done a good job. I think they did their process, and I think I'm ready to move on.
I guess I would echo that, Kevin and Jeff. I understand where you're coming from, Brian, completely, but I would echo everything that was said. Kim, do you have anything to say?
While I tend to agree with Brian, I'd like to see today that maybe this can be looked at moving forward, because he's right. We come here and approve something that we don't know, and I'm not speaking just to this. There's a lot of things that we do that, and we don't necessarily always have the background. We do trust our commissions. In this case, we have a whole family ready here too, and I would not like to see this postponed for that reason. And I think Reggie is a fine candidate, and he's been here for a while. He has a family, and I don't have any questions for him. But I really would like to see going forward that we have a little more, whether it's just knowledge. I mean, I read about this in the paper, about who the candidates were, and I just think, well, then we, and like I said, it's not this, there are several things, so.
You know, when we go through the election process as council people, we have to meet the candidates for them, and, you know, it gives the public a chance to come in and meet us, all that sort of thing. So I think what Brian is saying, what Kim's point is, you know, we as a council, we're expected to stamp off on this, and it'd be just nice to have an opportunity to perhaps get to know that candidate or prospective candidates a little better before, you know, finally have to stamp on it. I think that's what he's saying, and I don't know, you know, if there's a mechanism in the process for us to have that opportunity or not. Maybe we have to change the process. I don't know. I guess I'm comfortable with the way things have went in the past, and I guess I don't see any particular reason to change it, but, you know, and again, maybe there is.
And I'll say that it is a strange system that we have, especially with the Civil Service Commission. And we've talked about that, and we'll have a discussion about that moving forward. But I think it's important to understand the City Council is not approving the appointment of the Chief of Police. The City Council is ratifying the selection of the City Manager for Chief of Police. So that's the way it works. And so there's only 2 instances in employment where the City Council weighs in. One is the ratification of appointment of department heads. The other is the ratification of termination of department heads. Otherwise, everything else is not at this table. not, the selection of police officers does not come to this table. No other employees come to this table. And that's by design. It's by design of the city council, it's by design of the charter of the city, it's by design of the Civil Service Commission rules, that's what your role is you get the opportunity to at least, and if you need more information, we can try to give you more information. And maybe that's one of the things that we need to try to do, is provide you more information on the process. But I can tell you the Civil Service Commission spent a tremendous amount of time going through the process, not just interviewing candidates, but looking at applications, trying to figure out, how they wanted to approach the interview process. And there's a lot of dynamics in that, that they wind up going through, and they're good people, and they do a really good job of vetting candidates for you. That's their job. They're the ones that vet them for you. So if you don't like the process of them vetting candidates for you, then sit down as a council and look at that process and decide maybe you want to change it. But it is the process that's in place.
Is there a process, say, post-appointment that the council can meet with the police chief?
Absolutely.
Where we can, then we can
Absolutely.
get our questions answered?
Absolutely.
And find out, the direction of the department, what are we, different things. See, these are the things, no disrespect, I think that Reggie is a wonderful candidate for this position. My question is, I like some questions to, what is our police chief, what are his goals, what does he have in store for the department, what does he see going forward, what is his emphasis, and so that's where I'm at. I'm like, okay, well, how do we get there? So maybe this isn't, like you said, the proper way to do it, but at some point I wanted to bring it to the forefront to where I would be very satisfied if we were able to have that question and answer meeting at some time post this event. And I don't know if that has to be public or if that's a private session. I'm not sure on that. Aaron, you would have to be the one to answer that one. And I know that there are certain rules once there's an employee about bullying. There's obviously rules about once they're an employee, then you're in charge and we're not able to.
Well, I was just gonna make that comment. He's not working for you.
Right, exactly.
He's working for me.
Right.
And I work for you.
Right.
So if you have questions about, directions of law enforcement or snow plowing or finances or whatever it is, that's what I'm here for. So I'm really the person that you interact with, and then I go back and I interact with the department heads. But it is important to note that there is that language in there that you get to sign off on department heads. And so then, maybe there's some discussion that we have to have as to what the process is and what we're looking at. I can tell you flat out, that when we talk, and I do have a chance to talk with council members, and we have the joint city-county commission now, and we've talked about issues of law enforcement. I bring them back to the chief. So if you contact me and ask me about something, I bring it back to the chief. And the same thing, if we have issues that we need to get to you, the department heads bring them to me and I bring them back to you. So it's really the process that's in place in a city manager form of government. And I can tell you the hardest thing to do in this form of government is to keep you informed, because there's a lot of stuff you don't know about, and as a decision maker, you want to know about it. So maybe there's other tools that we can use to try to get at that, like sitting down and actually, we've already talked about sitting down and having coffee with Aaron and the chief and the sergeant, so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on and being more involved as a city manager. So there are things that we can talk about to make it easier for you to understand what's happening. And I'm very open to looking at that, because, in this last process, we really had the issue of a chief coming up as an opening, kind of blindsided all of us, because we didn't know what was gonna happen. And yet, we have the Civil Service Commission, and that's what their role is. And they, like I said, they spend a lot of time doing it. So, if you're uncomfortable, I think that's okay to be uncomfortable, but let's talk about it and figure out a way to make it in the future where you're not uncomfortable in the process.
That's why I fully understood, and that's why I asked you about the, him working for you, is because at the point before he does start working for you, then we would be able to openly ask these questions, but that's up to everybody else whether they want to do that or not. I'm not here to change anybody's mind on it, other than voice my own opinion, and that's what it is.
Isn't it great that we live in such an open and democratic society that we can do this? We can have this discussion. And I think the motion falls to the floor without a second. I will make a motion to support the resolution appointing Reggie Welly as the City of Morris Police Chief.
I will second that.
Any further discussion on the resolution?
Just before you vote on it, I do want to comment on a couple of the legalities of it. We do have the Civil Service Commission still in place, and as long as that's in place, it's going to be difficult to do it the way that you want to do it, Councilman Sullivan. There's strict guidelines in the statutes of how the duties that they're given, and right now, since we've adopted it in that manner, they have the power to do the vetting process. And I don't know if you remember a couple of months ago, I said I'd put together this chart, and I've given that to Blaine, kind of illustrating, what the differences are between the civil service process and the statutory guidelines for what powers the chief has with regard to employees in the police department, and then differences with our own union contracts, within the city. I've outlined that in a chart, and as long as we have that Civil Service Commission in place, there's always going to be conflict with something. It's either going to conflict with the union contract or other statutes, and we put this information together, and we're going to have to address that at some point, and maybe at that time, when we do address that, we can address the procedure for a high-level department head like this, so that you can ask questions that you want answered before you make that ratification decision. But unfortunately, I'm not there today to be able to package that and give it to you. So,
I guess I would like to add, thank you, Aaron. I guess I would like to add, it behooves us if we get the packet and we see something that we have, not just this, anything that we have a question on, pick up the phone, send an email to Blaine, whatever, get an answer, figure it out, or we read the paper. If we don't know anything about it, get a hold of Blaine. We can't get together as council members because of open meeting law, and that's very, very important. But Blaine can certainly answer your questions, or at least get you okay with anything. The questions that you have, Brian, probably were asked throughout the vetting process anywhere, some of them, and Blaine may have those answers anyway. But I'm sure after we finally get done with this meeting, I'm sure that Blaine or the chief will have an open door policy that we can go in and talk to him and ask those questions. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So any further discussion? We'll have roll call vote on the resolution, please.
Councilmember Waller?
Yes.
Salvi?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Mayor Dees?
Yes. Okay, do we have to do a swearing in?
Aaron's up.
This is all good.
raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Reggie Welly,
I, Reggie Rowley,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
and affirm
and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
my community,
my community,
and the agency I serve.
and the agency I serve.
I will discharge faithfully
I will discharge faithfully
the duties
the duties
of Chief of Police for the City of Morris,
of Chief of Police for the City of Morris,
County of Stevens,
County of Stevens,
State of Minnesota,
State of Minnesota,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
I will never betray my badge,
I will never betray my badge,
my integrity,
my integrity,
my character,
my character,
or the public trust.
or the public trust.
I will always have the courage
I will always have the courage
to hold myself
to hold myself
and others
and others
accountable for our actions.
accountable for our actions.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
This date right here, 3/12/19.
Congratulations, Chief.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Chief.
What are you doing this pinning?
My wife, Megan.
You have the vest on.
Didn't realize he was that tall.
Maybe it says she's that short.
Something I said.
I'm taking she approves.
Okay, continuing on, we have a donation of defibrillator to the library.
Hi.
Hi, Ann.
I'm Ann Barber, Library Director, and the library got a call about a month ago from Audrey Larson. She was calling representing a nonprofit organization called Papa's Angels. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. I had not, and so she sent me a note letting me know that how it got started. Her husband, Stephen Donald Larson, had his life ended tragically at the young age of 46 from a cardiac arrest. And she and a group of people came together to create this nonprofit. And it was called Papa's Angels because her daughters used to call him Papa Steve. So she said we created a nonprofit organization to honor Steve's life. It was our mission to educate the public on the importance of early defibrillation and to get as many AEDs placed in our community and surrounding areas as possible. We hope that another family will not have to live a day like we did when Steve left us. So she called the library and offered to donate one to the library. And we are we feel really happy and fortunate about that. They asked that any place that they donate an AED to, that we have the Stevens County ambulance staff train us. So we're planning on doing that, and we're going to make it open to the public. So anyone else that wants to come and learn about it can do that. So we may even do 2 sessions. And then they also asked that the recipient be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep. So that includes a new battery every 4 years, the cost is $170, and new pads every 2 years, which for adults, the cost of adult pads is $67. They also ordered child pads for the library because of our clientele, and those replacements are a little more, they're $180. So that's, I just wanted to let you know that we were offered this donation, and I checked in with Blaine, and I wanted to bring it to you guys as well.
All right, that's
So we
awesome.
just need a motion to accept it.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll move on that, really, I'll move on that donation of the defibrillator to the library.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I guess I'm aware of Papa's Angels, and they do, I don't know how many they've donated, but they've raised a lot of money and they've donated a lot of defibrillators, so that's wonderful. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Great, thank you, Ann. Any other citizens' comments at this time? Okay, we have no public hearing tonight. We do have reading and approval of minutes from February 26th.
I'll move to approve the February 26th minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And we have the condensed version of the same.
I'll move on the condensed version of the minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. We have consent agenda consisting of the audit of city bills, the February transit report, revenue expenditure reports from December and January and February, the application for exempt permit from the Lions, the Women of Today, the added Ducks Unlimited, and the payment number 18 for the water treatment facility for Magni Construction. And I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will.
Any discussion or questions on any of the items?
Just a couple questions. Line 41, Blaine, on the Heartland Motors full lease payment, what term of that lease is that? 4,
It's a 3-year lease.
3 years? Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then, line 48, if you can look at the leadership conference, I'm not sure if this is before the time or not, but I'd like to, after the conference, right?
Oh, it was very good. It's the, it was on communicating. And so there was lots of information, and there was, mostly the workshop was, one speaker was all day Friday, and then a different speaker was Saturday morning, so.
Okay.
It was good. There's a lot of people that go.
Good deal.
Where was that?
It was up at Craven's.
Oh, okay.
And, it's put on by the League of Minnesota Cities. I think they do one every year, every 2 years. The new, if you went as a new member, and then.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the same spot, because there was a bunch of new members, and then those that wanted to be there otherwise, so.
Cool.
Good deal.
Any other? That's what you had?
That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions on any of the items? I wanted to point out on the transit report, the year-to-dates were listed. I expect the numbers were right, but the years were, I think, wrong. It said 18 and 17. I think it should be 19 and 18. But I expect that the numbers were correct. Anything else on the consent agenda? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Petitions, requests, and communications. I make a motion to appoint Brandy Ross to the Tourism Board and Clement Liu and Melanie Fole to the Library Board.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Looking forward to having Brandy on the tourism board. She's gonna be a nice addition.
Yeah, I think she is, yeah. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have Crystal Lane's consumption and display permit renewal. They do it just a little bit different timing from the liquor licenses.
I make a motion to approve the Crystal Lanes consumption and display permit.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Ordinances and resolutions. We have a resolution approving an airport runway extension project funding agreement with Superior.
So we had a public meeting after the last council meeting to really kind of give everybody a heads up on what the proposed project's gonna be out at the airport, and took public input, and actually there's gonna be a technical advisory committee meeting for that project this Thursday at 11:30 right here in the council chambers, along with the airport advisory board. They're gonna be part of that meeting too to talk about that project. But way back in the beginning, when we first started talking about the runway extension that Superior wanted, I expressed to them that, you know, we have a really difficult time as a small city to be able to fund projects, and we're really dependent on state aid to be able to do what we normally do. And if we're doing public works projects, we use special assessments to help offset the costs, or we have state aid money that helps offset the costs. In the case of this airport project, I was really concerned that we weren't gonna be able to find the money to be able to offset the local share of runway project, and they expressed interest in helping fund it. And so the end result of that discussion is the funding agreement that you have before you, where actually two real things of concern are being addressed. One is the funding of the local share of the runway extension project, where Superior Industries has committed in this agreement to fund that local share for us, which is huge for us. And it's gonna be good for them, it's gonna be good for us, and it's really a nice thing that they're doing. At the same time, because this project is such a good project, and actually MnDOT Aviation and the FAA are really interested in this project, they've actually given it a quick review and a thumbs up to move forward, to the point where they don't even have the grant money available to reimburse us for any work right now, but they've given us the okay to start work. Now, that creates an even bigger problem for us if we're gonna start work before we even have grant money. You know, because depending on the cost of the projects, you know, we would have to fund everything. Well, in this case, again, Superior stepped forward and said, well, we'll help cash flow any projects until such time as the grant money comes back in, then they'll get reimbursed. So really, we don't have to commit funds now. If it's something really small, depending on what our cash flow abilities are as a city, we'll probably cash flow it. But when you get into some of the bigger stuff, like land acquisition, you know, you could maybe be looking at, with the whole process, you know, $250,000, $500,000, just depends on what happens in the environmental assessment. It could be a lot of money. So that's the two things that are addressed in this. There's nobody here representing Superior, but I did talk to Micah Zellweger, and he couldn't be here, but he's fully confident that I'd be able to explain it to you, and I'm recommending that the city council approve the funding agreement.
So I think it's you know, we all know that Superior's a real asset for our community, and I think it's important that we work with the local business to help them grow, which in turn is gonna help the community in general. So, I think it's a good deal, and there's really no tax implication for the taxpayer, so I guess I'll move in that resolution approving an airway runway extension project funding agreement with Superior Industries.
I'll second that.
Great, yeah, I agree. This is definitely a win-win for everybody, so. Any further discussion on the resolution?
Yeah, I see here, have we reached out to the property owners around it, Blaine? Everything
Yes.
is pretty good with them? I mean, that's just, I think it's a wonderful project.
Yep.
I just don't want anybody to be, you know, all upset that maybe the land is whatever, and seems to, everything's good there, so.
Yeah, I talked to actually, one of the property owners, is the farmer that farms that land. Another property owner actually isn't here, but the farmer that farms that land kind of speaks for that person, so I talked to that person. And the first step in this process is the environmental assessment. They'll look at all the different aspects of what's going on around there, and then we'll get into land acquisition. But it's not a lot of land unless something changes in the environmental assessment. We did have the public meeting. There was a couple that were there that were not happy about the project. They do live along the highway that's on the south side of the runway, and right now they get airport noise. So that concern will be part of the environmental assessment, because noise is one of the things that they'll take a look at, and they do have rules and regulations on how to proceed with that. At the same time, you know, I talked to the individuals, they bought a house by an airport, you know, and the actual zoning of that airport, I believe goes up to 6,000 feet on a runway, and not the 49 or the 48.99 feet that this one's gonna wind up being. So that'll all be taken into consideration, but we did identify anybody that lived around there, farmed around there, anything, and invited them in to be part of the process, and we'll continue to do that.
And I think they were here, I was at the.
Yeah, they were here.
You know, I concur, Blaine, it's, I lost my train of thought. Hate having that happen.
It's a very deliberate process that the federal government makes you go through. So you don't do anything until they give, well, and the next resolution's a perfect example of that. But you don't do anything unless they give the thumbs up to it. And the initial thing was for them to look at the project from an overview, and they thought it was a really good project, but now you get into the details of what you need to be doing.
Back to me, I guess what I was gonna say is that as far as airplane or air traffic, I just don't think there's gonna be, it's not like a commercial airline where you're gonna have people, you know, planes coming and going all the time. I think there's gonna be obviously some plane traffic in and out, but I don't think it's gonna be to the extent where it'd be, I guess, a real nuisance.
I mean, I think that'll be addressed, like you said, the sound.
Right.
Sound
Yep.
in the environmental.
Yeah.
My biggest concern was just the land ownership and acquisition, that we were being, you know, and everybody was in agreement with that.
And we've been kind of sitting on this because, you know, I said, we don't even want to talk about this until we have that public meeting, you know, so that the public knows what's happening, because, you know, there's some discussions you had, you know, leading up to this, but nothing's really happened, and that's actually one of the things that we shared with people, is nothing's happened other than they think it's a good idea to do this project, and now you start the process of checking off all the boxes, and the environmental is the first one, and that's not scheduled to be done until later this fall, probably towards the end of the year. So that's the first big step, and that answers a lot of those questions, and you'll be talking to everybody that's involved with it.
And I haven't received any calls about it or any concern, and that was just my one concern. I think moving forward with a project like this is good for the city, it's good for the big business that's in town, that supports our tax base, and I think it's great as long as everybody can make it work.
I agree, good for the community.
Any further discussion on the resolution? We'll have roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Salty?
Yes.
Waller?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Pellickson?
Yes.
Mayor Heath?
Yes. We have a resolution approving an independent fee estimate for the runway extension project environmental
Just a
assessment.
couple things. So we actually have an airport engineer, it's TKDA Engineering. We can only have an airport engineer designated for 5 years. So this is actually the last thing that they can work on prior to us going out for proposals for engineers again, is the environmental assessment. So they're our engineer, they're gonna probably do the environmental assessment. But one of the requirements that the federal government has is that you find an independent engineering firm that will take the proposal for the environmental assessment, and they will do an independent estimate of what they would charge to do it. And then that's provided to us, we share it with the state and federal government, so that they can see what that engineer company would have done the project for, and then we'll see what the TKDA is gonna do it for, and then they compare them. You can be within a certain percentage of what it is, but that's the only reason we're doing this, is it's required by the federal government. The engineer can't be an engineering firm that's part of this project, and KLJ is not, and they cannot be an engineering firm that put in a proposal to be our airport engineer 5 years ago. KLJ was not, and they actually did the independent fee estimate for the parallel taxiway project. And so that's how we picked them up again. So that's all this is, and then the next thing you're gonna see come to the table is gonna be the resolution to go ahead with the environmental assessment. And that could be as soon as next meeting or the meeting after that, depending on how soon they can do the independent fee estimate.
Now, can TKDA, next time we go out, can they reapply?
Yeah.
or no?
Yeah, and it's probably not uncommon for your same engineer to be picked up, but actually, I got a 80-page federal circular today that was updated from the last time we did it, that specifies exactly how you do the process. You know, from advertising to accepting proposals, to grading and critiquing the proposals and weighing out who the candidates are, and then that information will be provided to you when that comes back to you. But the next project that they're probably gonna work on is gonna be land acquisition, and the next thing will probably be preliminary design for the runway project. And that might not happen till this fall, but we're gonna wanna have an engineer come on board. And just one thing so you know, WSN is our engineer for underground work. They actually work as a consultant with TKDA, because they have a very good surveying crew. And so any surveying work that TKDA has been doing, they've used WSN to do it for them. So sometimes you get engineering firms that are consultants to other engineering firms, depending on what their specialties are. So I would not guess that WSN would be applying to be our engineer, but there are other ones that have talked to us about putting in a proposal.
I'll move on that resolution approving an independent fee estimate for the runway extension project, environmental assessment.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? We'll have roll call vote on the resolution, please.
Councilmember Miller,
Yes.
Jellison,
Yes.
Waller,
Yes.
Talby,
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
So this is a new one I dropped on you, but I think it's very interesting that you actually have a resolution, and you also have a memo from the city of Minneapolis, from their sustainability coordinator, actually is Stacy Miller. They reached out to us because they know who we are, and they wanted us to sign off on this, because they want our name on the listing of communities that are in favor of doing this. The main gist of this whole thing is for the metropolitan area, but they reached out to us, and I thought that was very unique. I shared a copy of our strategic plan that was just passed, and she thought that was really, really wonderful. But all this is under the current state laws, we as a city adopt the state building code. That's what we use. Under current state law, the state building code cannot be modified to make it more strict. And there's some communities in the metropolitan area like Minneapolis, I think Maplewood, Shoreview, there's some other ones that they want to implement as a voluntary code, a stricter code for new commercial buildings and renovated buildings to make them carbon neutral. So what they're doing is they're imposing additional requirements on buildings, and there's ways to protect the building owners from, you know, the fees being too great and stuff. There's things built into it. But it's their way of saying, we want to reduce the amount of energy that's used in our community, and we want to do it by making sure new buildings are made to environmentally friendly, sustainable, and energy efficient standards. Now, it doesn't affect us at all, because it's a voluntary thing. All this legislation does is says that the state of Minnesota is going to allow you as a community to adopt this additional code, and it's actually part of what the Minnesota legislature's already looked at, Minnesota Sustainable Buildings 2030. So really what it is it's an addition to the building code that puts into place in cities that decide that they want to adopt it, some additional requirements to make buildings energy efficient, to reduce the amount of energy being used. And I thought, well, we just got done approving sustainability goals to reduce energy in our community, so it fits right in with what we're looking at doing. Now, I'm not gonna come back to you and say, now I want you to adopt the building 2030, because that's a long discussion that probably needs to take place, but they've already had that discussion in some of these cities, and they proposed the legislation. And so I thought this is a good resolution to bring before the council to kind of lend your support to other communities that maybe are farther ahead than us or have other ideas how to reduce things in their buildings. Some of the information I saw was the proposals that they have for things to go in buildings probably wouldn't add more than 2.5% to the cost of building the building, but at the same time, it's gonna reduce the amount of energy used in the building. And I know the climate smart municipalities had a discussion about that, putting into place new building codes at the state level to mandate building efficiencies and stuff like that. I wasn't in favor of that, because that's a longer discussion, because we don't want to necessarily jump in and force local builders. But a good example of a project would be the 16-unit apartment building. If for some reason we had imposed additional requirements that they had to put in certain heating, certain windows, certain things like that to make it more energy efficient. Carbon neutral is what they talk about. And actually one of the interesting parts was she actually sent me a video with Brian Herman, because the new Green Prairie Residence Hall is a building that was built that way. And actually the state buildings have to be built this way, and any project that gets state bonding money has to be built that way. So that's where the 2030 building code really comes into place. So it's not like they came up with the building code, it's already there, and it's being used on state projects. So there's cities that want to be able to use it. So I'm recommending that you just pass a resolution of support for the legislation, and that's really where it ends with us, but they're excited to have us looking at it.
Just to restate it then, that it is what this legislation's intending to do is, the building code is either you're in or you're out. And with this amendment to the building code, it would make one section of the building code voluntary, so that it would allow cities to opt into this one portion of it,
Yeah,
but they don't
yeah,
have to do it.
Yeah, the building code's more than energy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to do it.
If they decided to do it, can they make the people that are building the buildings and stuff follow that?
Yes. Yeah, that's what Minneapolis wants to do.
Right.
Is they want new buildings built to a better standard for energy efficiency. And it's actually, when you think about it, it's probably good for the tenants in apartment buildings if buildings are built to an energy standard, because they're probably the ones that are paying the costs sometimes for utilities and stuff like that. But
Can the owners deny it? I mean, let's say if you're building, you say, well, that's above the Minnesota State building code, I don't want to follow those rules. Do they have that option then if you've adopted?
Well, as I understand it, I'm just reading this for the first time myself too, but this would give cities the option to add on the 2030 building code. So right now, if you're either a building code city or you're not, you can opt in or you can opt out. If you adopt the building code, you have to follow it exactly as the statute says in statute. And here, now, they'd add to the building code a provision for cities to allow them to add on the 2030 code. So they don't have to do it if they don't want to, but it would give them the opportunity to do it if their city council votes to have it.
But then if they did vote to have it, then all the building permits and projects would have to follow it.
Have to
Right.
follow. Once you adopt it, it's
Yep.
our option to do it or not, but then once we decide,
Yep.
everything falls. Okay, I understand.
So this is supporting the option, then to actually implement the option, that would be a whole
But
different.
that's a whole different thing, yeah.
Yep.
This is just supporting legislation to allow it. You know, and there are cities that don't have building codes. You know, actually, I went up to Wadena after the tornado because they had a big meeting on how to work with FEMA and stuff, and I had some experience in that, and I didn't know, but they didn't have building codes. So in Wadena, if you're building a house, you rely on the contractor to know how to build that house, because there's no city inspector that's coming and looking at it at all.
Based on
Which-
that one statistic here, I thought it was kind of interesting. Buildings account for about 40% of all the energy used in Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's a pretty alarming statistic when you think about that. And I think it's important to have some sort of code to follow if that's the case.
I'll move on this resolution supporting state legislation in a voluntary code option for cities in the state of Minnesota.
I will second.
Any further discussion on this resolution? We'll have roll call on the resolution, please.
Councilmember Gollison?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Waller?
Yes.
Mayor Hughes?
Yes. City manager report.
Actually, I forgot Deb wasn't gonna come. Deb couldn't make it tonight, but, I wanted to call Deb out and Stacy out. We had two people that were missing, for an extended period of time in City Hall. One had a baby and one, was on a medical leave. And, between Deb and Stacy and Jody, taking up all those responsibilities, they were able to handle all the duties and responsibilities that we needed to take care of. And I just wanted to say thank you for a job well done. You know, it's pretty tough when one person leaves and you wind up having to cover for an extended period of time, but to have two people leave for extended period of time, and you know, Deb basically took over responsibility for doing all the accounts payable and fund accounting. She did it before when Jean was there and stepped in, and then basically Stacy took over handling all the other duties that Sandy Anderson was doing, and I just want to thank them for that. Because quality people, I'll catch Deb the next time she's here to let her know. The water plant, the big issue with the water plant now is we're gonna be a month later. And I found out about that when I was talking with Chris Swanson when we were touring the St. Cloud water plant. The owner of Magni Construction had talked to him about where they're at with the construction project. And part of it is, we talked a little bit about it, the dewatering that they had to do up front originally, and then part of it is just the bad weather that we've had, you know, starting towards the end of December. You know, we just got into a really nasty streak of bad weather. They've been working hard in there, and actually one of the things the engineers have done is they've upped the number of meetings that we have with the contractor team. So instead of meeting once a month, we're meeting every 2 weeks. I went out and met with them last Thursday. They're doing the best they can to get caught up. Actually, I mentioned in here, they're actually working 6 days a week, and they're working long hours. But they're getting there, so I think it's important to understand that they're not gonna be able to put soft water out to the public until May instead of April, and so then we're looking at backing off on the fees going up in April, like we said, until we get into May when we actually have soft water. So that's the biggest change with that. If you're gonna get a chance to go in there and see it, it's actually a very impressive facility, a lot bigger than the old one. But they've already got 2 of the wells that are connected to the new plant. And the 3rd well, I think, was gonna be connected within a week and a half to the new plant. So they have all the underground wells connected to the plant, so they have access to water. And then they started looking at reconditioning the other wells. The new well got put in, well number 8, and that's been run to the new plant. And eventually, you know, one of the last things you're probably gonna see at the site before they do the landscaping and everything is gonna be the old plant coming down. As soon as they get the new plant up and running, then they'll start looking at demoing the old plant. So they have a lot of stuff to do yet, but it's really an impressive place. And we did get a chance to tour the St. Cloud lime softening plant to learn a lot more about how that operates. To include, we actually saw the farmer come in and get lime. And actually, I've been contacted by at least 2 farmers locally that are interested in lime. You know, and so one of the things they're doing is putting together a bid spec, and then we'll bid out, you know, for somebody to come and get the lime. We'll probably have maybe 1 load a week. We got to see them load it. It's pretty neat process. They got a lime compactor, and then you just, once it gets pulled apart, there's big sheets of lime that fall into a trailer, and the farmer can take it. And we already know that there's farmers that have equipment to spread it, because there's farmers that are getting lime from beet plants right now and using it on their fields. So we learned a lot of stuff about the water treatment plant. I did have, as I mentioned in here, one of the softener companies was upset with us in the brochure we put out, but eventually I explained everything we're doing, and they were okay with it. And actually, I was gonna try to have that ordinance update here, but since the plant was gonna be backed up a month, I figured I'd wait. And I think it's with Aaron now to review it, but we'll be bringing that back. But you know, the biggest issue they had was it didn't say anywhere there that you could update your water softener to an on-demand one that could be recalibrated, and you certainly can. And so they were happy with that. I mentioned the TAC meeting, and then we have there's going to be a small little retreat up at Camp Ripley for climate smart municipalities next Monday afternoon and Tuesday. And what else we got? I'll answer any questions you might have about anything.
Wayne, I just backing up on the water treatment plant, and I understand that Mother Nature is throwing us a curve, so forth, I get that part. With the original contract with the contractor, was there any clause or fine in there for not meeting the deadline? I mean, I know we don't wanna be unreasonable, obviously.
Right, there is, and you're absolutely right, what you just said. We don't wanna be unreasonable, so we haven't waived off anything. So what we've told them is, you know, it was supposed to be substantially done by April 15th, so you need to work as hard as you can to get this thing done as soon as you can, and then when that's done, then we'll sit down and we'll figure out what they did and whether or not there's any, that's really what engineers are there for, is to watch over it, and then they'll recommend back to us whether or not, you know, we penalize them for it, but there are penalties built into that. Okay. For not being on time, you know, and that's the question the owner was there on Thursday, and I asked him, I said, when I go back to my council, they're gonna wanna know why it's late. So what do I tell them? You know, I mean, that's what he said, you know, the weather's, and we all know the weather's been really nasty. You know, actually, they're digging out parts, you know, from the snowstorm that are sitting out there that they're bringing into the plant. But ultimately, they have to satisfy us.
Okay.
You know, I think you wait until it's up and running and everything's working right, and then you sit down and you figure out, you know, what do we wanna charge them for being late, if anything, how much?
Gotcha.
Yep.
And then the other thing, I guess, with regards to that lime, if I understand that correctly, the purpose of lime or the benefit to the farmer is it actually neutralizes like, if you have a high concentration of manure on fields and stuff, is that what the
It
purpose
helps
of lime
adjust
is?
the pH of the land,
Yeah.
is what it
For
does.
acidic soil.
So a lot of the land around here doesn't have, I'm not a farmer, doesn't have pH problems. The way,
Some, but not.
some do, but up north they have more. So they actually have a farmer that they pay to take it. And so we really know what the cost of them getting rid of theirs is. But I've actually talked to one farmer that may just want it. I'll come and get it if you let me have it. Because they're getting lime from Wapaton, the
Okay.
beet plant.
All right, thank you, that's all I
Yeah,
got.
great. Well, that'd be awesome.
Again, the snow removal issues, I think they've done a super job with the weather we've had this last kabam, and hopefully everyone's patient and realizing that we're doing the best we can and moving snow, and not pushing off on neighbors. I've had a few calls from people and I've addressed them to contact the police department to go and talk to people, but, you know, just, they've done a super job, and it's just been continual, but hopefully here in another couple weeks.
What'd you say, Reggie, 17 vehicles?
17 with the
So that's pretty good.
That's all.
That's all.
Well, this is gonna seem like an odd question perhaps, but, you know, if I remember right, with regards to, like lawn mowing, snow blowing, don't we have some sort of an ordinance that would prevent somebody from getting up at 4 in the morning with their snow blower?
Yeah, we have a noise.
Mowers late at.
It's like 7 to 7.
I mean,
We have a noise
I
ordinance.
understand people wanna get up
Is there
and
you?
blow.
Were you up?
No, I'm not gonna name names, but I'm just saying, you know, you wake up to a snow blower at 4:30 in the morning and.
God, Kevin, if I can't sleep in, I mean, what the heck?
Well, I live across from the school, and I know there's times where they're moving snow in the middle of the night, and every time they back up, it's the beep, beep, beep.
You
Yeah.
know, I know our city guys, they have their deal, they got a job to do it
Yeah.
like that, but I'm talking about like a private, you know,
But if they
resident.
have to get up and go to work in the morning.
People
they
gotta
don't
go
have
to
a
the
choice.
hospital, the
Yeah.
nursing homes, those positions work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and those people need to get out.
Because this last one, you wouldn't have got out
I
without,
get it, I get it.
Oh,
You wouldn't have got out without
you-
blowing snow.
Next time you get up with him, and then he's gonna be done that much faster.
Yeah,
You
just
go
grab
right
my
to
snow
bed.
blower and, you know,
Yeah, just get out there with yours and
Be
you
a
help
team
him, and then
player.
you
Right, I
slap
get it.
5, and then you go to bed.
just be a team guy, I get it, all right.
And I would just like to say, I think that the city crews are doing really great, because when we're tucked into our beds, sleeping all nice and warm, they're out there in the middle of the night clearing the roads and really working hard to do it. I just think that I don't think they get enough credit. I think too many people want to be negative about how it's going, but I think they're.
yeah, I think people have been really good. They're nervous about tomorrow if we get rain,
Yeah, I'm sure
you
they
know,
are.
so. But
All we can do is all we can
we
do.
just have to wait and see.
All right, anything else on the city manager report? We have a board of review memo from the county. Please read this memo at your next city or township meeting. There are 2 items that need to be addressed for the 2019 local board of equalization and appeal and equalization meetings to be held in April. A quorum must be present at the local board of appeal and equalization. A board member must be present that has attended the local board and appeal and equalization training sessions, of which 4 of us have. So we're good
That's April 1st.
for this
correct?
year, April 1, yeah. Yeah, it's April 1 at 5:15, I believe.
Yeah, I think we did that,
We got
the
that in
online
our-
version.
we got that in our notes, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Did the online.
Yeah, I think they sent something out before,
I
so.
think we-
We're all good to go, do we have no one, we're all up, or?
We'll have a reminder of it here.
I'm sure they'll let us
Next
know, but I
meeting to
don't,
give us a,
I don't think we're,
I just did mine, so.
yeah, I don't think we're all together. So I don't think we'll all be done. we must have at least one of us have to have qualified,
You
so.
just renewed I renewed just last year also, so. that's
Yeah,
good for
it was
what,
either last year or,
4 or 5 years.
is it that long?
I did it last
I
year.
think it's
online.
5.
I think it
Well,
is.
It's a 4 or 5 year, I mean, I've only had to do it,
I renewed 2 years ago, so I think I'm still good for.
Yeah, I think I did 2 years ago too.
I think it used to be 2 and a half.
Yeah.
Quorum, I'm good. I think
And
that's what I said
it's,
last year.
it's an online thing, Kim, so it's
Pretty easy.
pretty easy. It does take a little time, but it's not so bad.
But you can do chapters.
But certainly don't feel any pressure because we're okay.
I'm not really,
What? Okay.
I'm good for another 4 years. Fair enough.
Okay, anything else to come before the council? Apparently we have some exciting stuff going on after the council meeting.
We do.
Is that during the meeting or is that after the
I
meeting?
think we can do it after the meeting. I don't know that.
We're not actually deciding anything.
We're not deciding anything, you're just getting your equipment.
Okay. All right, meeting adjourned.